Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to another episode of Justice for All Now. You're watching us on Muslim Network TV, on Samsung Galaxy 19, Apple TV, Roku TV, and Amazon Fire TV. After Yazidis were chased out of their homes in 2015, little has been done to heal the wounds of the minority group. ISIL, which considers the Yazidis heretics, slaughtered thousands of Yazidi men and abducted women and girls. Yazidi children were forcibly converted to Islam, which, as we all know, is prohibited. They were taught Arabic and banned from speaking their native Kurdish. 6 years later, Yazidis are now demanding justice for the persecution that was inflicted upon them at the brutal hands of ISIS. Joining us today is Murad Ismael. Murad Ismael is the executive director and board member of YAZDA, a nonprofit organization established to support the Yazidi ethno-religious minority group in the United States and the Yazidi homeland in northern Iraq and northeastern Syria. Murad's motivation to help genocide victims and raise awareness to protect minorities who have been a subject of persecution based on identity. Murad received his master's and MCE degrees from Norwich University and the University of Houston in Texas. We welcome Murad on the show.
And thank you so much, and I'm very glad and honored to be with you. It's very important day for us as we commemorate the Al-Qaeda attack on Tel Azir and Sibai in 2007. Also, tomorrow will be the commemoration of the Kurdish massacres that took place in 2014. So it's a very special day, but it's also a very special program, and I wanted to be with you today.
No, thank you so much for being here and for being such a bold voice for your people. Tell me a little bit about yourself and introduce, so our audience can get to know you a little better, and describe your work in a little bit more detail.
Sure, Hannah. So I am the former director of YAZDA, but I'm the founder of it. Myself, I'm a Yazidi from Sinjar. I was born and raised in Sinjar. I went to College of Engineering in Mosul, University of Mosul, for 3 years. And I finished my bachelor's in Duhok, northern Iraq, in the Kurdistan region. I came to the US in 2009 to study here. So I finished my graduate programs with University of Norwich and University of Houston in engineering and geophysics. And I was really not an activist. I was a normal person who came to America to study and to work and to take care of his family. So what happened to the Yazidi community brought me to here, to be an activist. And since 2014, I've helped establish the YAZDA organization, which is the biggest Yazidi organization globally, that works on multiple aspects of the genocide and on the Yazidi community in terms of genocide recognition, in terms of legal and justice and accountability, also in terms of providing services to the Yazidis and other IDPs in the Kurdistan region. I've been, and in Iraq, in whole Iraq, we're involved in, been involved in multiple projects, mostly around justice and getting the genocide recognized in more than 10 countries, including here in the United States, in the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and other places.
Viewers who might not be aware, would you care to talk about the values, elements, and practices of the Yazidis? You can discuss the history of the group, the people, the culture, language, anything you like. I really believe that our audience needs to know more about your people.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important, and that's something we should have done before even 2014, because it's really important for the world to know who Yazidis are, their values, their faith, their culture, because I think once people know that, they will be fascinated and they will admire this culture, which is one of the oldest cultures and religions in the Middle East, basically. So Yazidis as a religion, their history goes back to couple to 3,000 or 4,000 years, and even more. One of the old faiths of the Mesopotamia and the let's say the Iranian religions that were evolved over the time. And Yazidism, it is the we believe one of the first people that believed in one God and believes in 7 angels, that we believe the God sent the supreme angel, which we call Taus Malak, to the earth to help create the creation that you see now. The Yazidis are believer of one God and 7 angels uh, and no prophet in term of it's a non-Abrahamic religion. It does not have a prophet. However, it does have people who came throughout the history and who've changed the course of the faith and have added more, more to it. And that goes back the reformist, Uday ibn Musafir, who was one of the reformists of the Yazidi faith, but he's not the founder of the Yazidi faith. As I said, the Yazidi faith it is a sister religion, very similar to the Zoroastrians. We believe that the Zoroastrian faith is an offshoot of the Yazidi faith. Yazidis have, culturally, they are very close to other Middle Eastern cultures. They speak the Kurdish language. They dress, so the dress and the culture is very similar to the. I mean, it's very similar to the Kurdish culture, because the Yazidis are historically in what's known as the Kurdistan region or the Kurdistan territories, which is both, from Iran to Turkey to Syria and to Iraq. That's where the Yazidis are found today. Yazidis are about 1 million people. And from that 1 million people, half of them are in Iraq. About 100,000 were in Syria before what happened in 2011 and after that. And the rest of the Yazidis are scattered, mostly in Europe. About 200,000 Yazidis are in Europe. The Yazidis also were a big group in Turkey until late 70s. And now a lot of the Yazidis of Turkey have already also left that country, mostly toward the European countries.
Perhaps spread by a big misconception that's perhaps spread by media is that Yazidis are Christian, and this has and that's something that has been spread. And so, this is very fascinating to learn. So, what are the places of worship that Yazidis worship in? What are they called?
Yeah, so Yazidi have also been falsely being called offshoot of Islam or offshoot of Christianity or other religions, but it is, to our understanding, it's not true. It is an independent faith that was created in the spectrum of the Middle Eastern faiths, not just Yazidis. You have Sabians, you have Kakayans, you have other faiths in the region were created. Well, some faiths have been now less effective or less separate in the region. But as you know, the Middle East is a very diverse area with the faiths, and same the Yazidis are also one of these groups that are found. So they've also been false that they were accused to be follower of Yazid bin Muawiyah, which is not true. The name Yazidism does not come from Yazid bin Muawiyah. It comes from the name of God, as the people of God. That if you translate from the Kurdish, it means the people of God. So the Yazidis do share a lot of values, as with other religions and cultures in the vicinity, and that include Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism. Also, Yazidism share a lot of links also with Hinduism and a lot of the links with Islam, Christianity, and other faiths. It is, if you look to the Middle East, it's a region where a lot of cultures have lived together, and that they've learned from each other. Yazidis are also like them.
of discriminations have Yazidis faced over the past decade, and how has it culminated in a dangerous way with ISIL/ISIS? How has this oppression negatively affected Yazidis?
So Hina Yazidis have been really crushed in their homeland. From not just Iraq and not just now, going back more than 600, 700 years ago. The most of the Kurds in the Kurdistan region of today, we believe, were Yazidis, or at least half of them were Yazidis historically. That they've been, that they were persecuted for their religious identity, and that came through ways of attacks, mostly through the Ottoman Empire's campaigns. So that's why Yazidis, if you talk to them, they will say you've been subject to 72 farmans or 72 genocide campaigns. Of course, all were not genocide campaigns. Some were, large-scale genocide campaigns. Some were smaller scale, to a town or some place. But Yazidis believe, and they have records in many cases, that they were attacked 72 times before the 2014 and 2007 attacks. 72 times they were attacked for their faith. So that persecution goes back. If you look back to Turkey, for example, south of Turkey, my grandfather came from Turkey because of that persecution that was, going on for years. We still have land there. Not just us, but there was, tens of tribes. Yazidi tribes were in Turkey, were forced to go from Turkey to Syria and to Sinjar. A lot of the Yazidis of Sinjar actually came from other places. Now, they came about 400 years ago. They came from Turkey and other places. Of course, Yazidis were in Sinjar before that, but they came. So the history of persecution have always been done in name of God or Allah, as you know. But we also know it's not. It's people who use their religion. So with ISIS, the same thing. Also before that, with Al Qaeda, the same. So Al Qaeda, 2007, they brought 4 trucks of IEDs full of explosives. They exploded them within 2 of our towns. At that time, 2007, this is the biggest explosion in Iraqi history, the biggest explosion in the Middle East, and the biggest explosion after Hiroshima and Beirut now. So it will be probably the third biggest explosion ever that happened, especially in the civilian areas. So we had, around 2,500, 3,000 people, civilians were either killed or injured in that attack. And of course, ISIS campaign was different. So ISIS, when they came to Sinjar, they came in 2014. Before they came, they had their what they call religious scholars. They decided that Yazidis were infidels and were not people of a book, and that they could not be treated as others, like Christians, Jews, and others, because it was not a legitimate faith. So what they did was they said that the men would have to be killed. So they put siege under Sinjar from all the direction. They said men should be killed and women and children should be taken as slaves. And we should have full rights to them. And this is really exactly what they did. So within the first 2 weeks, about 12,000 Yazidis, men, women, children, were either killed or taken. And what ISIS did, as you know, not just the killing. So the men were killed summarily the first hours of their capture. But then, the women and the children were taken. And we have the records, we have the names. From that number who were taken to captivity, about 6,800 were taken to captivity. We still have about 2,800 who are still missing. We're still trying to extract them from various places in Iraq and Syria. And you all know how systematically ISIS used, the Yazidis as sex slaves, also extracted their children from their families, and they give them away to others.
It really is a terrible, terrible thing that was done, oppression that was committed and documented. And that is one of the differences, perhaps, that the world is able to watch now and document these genocides, whereas in the past they were not able to do so. So in 2014, about 550, and correct us if we're wrong, 550,000 Yazidis were settled in Iraq and Syria.
So in Iraq, about 550,000 to 600,000 were in Iraq before the genocide. In Syria, about 80,000.
A very violent oppression of that here has had a lasting impact on Yazidi people living not only in that area but around the world. How has your community reacted to this violence, to the after effects of these violence? And what are some of the things? You mentioned before that you yourself got motivated to leave your life as an engineer and become an activist and advocate for your people. Tell us other ways that the diaspora has responded.
Yeah, I mean, indeed, this was on a scale that was too much to take in. As you know, we're all consider ourselves as civilized people, and we consider ourselves at the time of enslavement, the time of injustice on that large scales, we thought it was over. Indeed, we thought it was over. We were thinking, I think as the Yazidi community, we were thinking everyone within his or her situation inside Iraq, we were integral part of the Iraqi society. Inside the Kurdistan region, we were integral part of the Kurdish society. Also in the West, same, just as the Muslim community in the US. We were looking into normal life, trying to come out also of years of injustice, lack of education. We went back to Sinjar even before. The first people who start going to school was like 70s. The first doctor we had was in 90s. And we had, you're talking about a community, a rural community that is just as like rural community you see in Yemen, or let's say in other like Morocco or Tunisia or other country. Community that was trying to build itself. It was all new to us, and we were trying to build. And when this came on this scale, it created a level of trauma that you wouldn't, I never imagined existed. The Yazidi community now is dealing with a level of trauma that they never experienced before, and probably even as a human society has not been experienced before. Because maybe for a community that was subject to enslavement, 500 years ago would be different. But now, because people are more civilized, they are more in peace. So if that happens to you, imagine I've sat down with Yazidi girls who are just as you, conservative, protective. They look for marriage, for they look for building a family. Those children were taken and were raped on systematic basis. I've had meetings and sit down with girls at the age of 8 or 9 who were not even physically, qualified for sexual relationship, and they were harmed. ISIS also took Yazidi wives. I've met with a lot of the husbands where ISIS took their wives. So what happened? What you call a sharaf, as honor in our cultures, your culture as well. When someone stabs you in your heart, that what did ISIS stabbed us in our heart and in our soul. They also did it so cowardly. They went after children and women, and I think that's definitely not a Muslim value. That's definitely not a human value, and that's nobody's value when you go after other communities. Uzal, Nas al-Uzal, who don't have weapons. You go and you extract their women.
It gave me shivers just to think about it. It was something that you watch in horror, and when someone is using your name to do it, then it is sort of like it's like shooting a gun from your shoulder and tying you to the back and saying, no, shoot. That's the sort of feeling that you had, that we had watching this, these group of literally criminals were and using, so this is something that just it makes me shudder to think about it, and cannot imagine the the pain that and the sad part about it, when in our communities, because ISIL is such a elevated to such a level, that women suffer double, because their ISIL has been attacked, and then after the attack, then again they have to relive the trauma, because then society, it's very hard for society to accept them back. And so subhanallah. So what are being done, what is being done to help these women and children who have been rescued? What are ways people who might be listening and watching can help?
Yeah, no, I think you raised some really good points. I want to talk a little bit about that before I go to what needs to be done. And I think that's, to me, really important. You know, part of the work I've done, I want ISIS exposed. So first to the Muslim communities around the world, that who they are, because what they are going to do and what they've been doing, that's what also Al-Qaeda did, and other what they call them radical Islamic groups, what they call themselves, did. I think the Muslim communities around the world should know who they are. These people are much worse than animals. In fact, they have no base of humanity. They don't even meet the minimum bar of being called human beings. What they go around the world with social media, and that's why, for this particular reason also, I want to talk to you, because I want this message to get to the Muslim world who are on Facebook, on Twitter, on other places. Don't listen to these crazy people who come and use the name of God, because they don't even themselves don't know who God is. You know, they themselves don't even believe in God. What they do, they use their faith, because the religion is the easiest way to get people, the easiest way to get people emotional about something they believe in. So they go after young people, they go after people. In some cases, people who are educated. You know, we had doctors who traveled all the way from the West, or who were in Iraq or other places, going and raping children, you know, believing in this ideology. And so this brutality and this what now they call a movement, we cannot defeat it without the Muslim community. And I believe that the Muslim community have already they've risen, and they have said no, and they are saying no to it. You know, also it's really important to hear mention, a lot of Muslims have helped the Yazidis. You know, a lot of the Muslims have put their life at risk to rescue Yazidis from captivity. You know, I know of cases for fact, when we were in touch with them. These people have risked their lives in Iraq, you know, to rescue the Yazidis. There are people who stood against them. I sit down also with a Sunni Muslim who ISIS killed 6 or 5 of his brothers. So it's really important also globally to understand that when we talk about ISIS and this criminal group, we don't target Islam, and we don't target Muslims. And we have to be very discreet about who we target, and we have to be very discreet in our respect to every religion and every faith, and everyone, just in America or in Europe or anywhere. We should all have the choice, to practice our faith. Now, you said something about how Yazidi women are suffering, and you're right. You know how the women were subject to much more burden. So the women are in the whole Middle East. They are coming out of years of injustice. As you know, they are still not out of years of injustice. So the injustice still continues as we speak now in a normal society. So in addition to that, then you have enslavement. Then you have all these women where the husband is killed now, and the woman is left with 5 children or 4 children or 3 children. She would have to take care of them with 0 income. So I've sit down with a lot of these women and girls. They said, we forgot about what happened to us. What we want now is to take care of our children. We want to take care of our families. We want to give a dignified life to our daughters and our sons, so they don't, so they can just live. It's really important that the Yazidi community didn't come out of genocide, to heal itself. It's still in a genocide. The Yazidi community still suffers with displacement of 2/3 of the Yazidi population is still displaced. The Yazidi homeland is still destroyed. Yazidi homeland has been no systematic help to rebuild homes. The Yazidi women go through trauma, trauma that a level of trauma that has not been seen before. We've seen Yazidi women how they feel, and they get the psychological shocks on daily basis or sometimes weekly basis. And now where they are back, there is no platform to take care of them. There is no platform to take care of them.
That's something very important to note, is because they're not coming back to a society that is functional. Right now, Iraqi society itself is dysfunctional because of prolonged war and post-war. So when they come out, where do they go, and who is there to take care of them? This is something that a lot of us don't realize. Even when they have been freed, which society, are they going back to their homeland, to their rural villages? Who lives in those villages? Do those villages still exist? So those questions often are not, a lot of people don't know. And where do they go back? And this is something that you just said, but can you tell us where they've gone? Where are they now? Who's taking care of them?
So Hannah, yes, the Yazidi community was very receptive and very caring, in fact, for the survivors and for their families. And still until today, a lot of charity work is being done, a lot of psychosocial support is being done, a lot of other social support is being done. But you're talking about a community that was crushed in a genocide. A community where family cannot afford $5 until today. Last week, I received messages on the social media where someone sends me, he has $10 in his family waiting for a child to be born in the next few days. He cannot take care of the child. The people don't have money, don't have income. As you said, Iraq as a country is failing. Iraq as an economy is failing with dumping oil prices, with the economic situation of war. The money was spent on the war, and also all the areas are destroyed. So there's really no platform to take care of it. That's why when I was in YAZDA, we supported, and we still are, YAZDA still supports, we supported the relocation of the Yazidi women and children to countries where they can take care of. So we have more than 1,200 who've gone to Germany from the survivors, strictly from the survivors who were captives and their families. Also, same applies to about 1,100 who went to Canada and about 4,000 who went to Australia. So what we did, we really knew that there was no platform to take care of them. What we did, we worked since day one on relocation programs, and we've managed to resettle most of the people who were rescued. There are still a few thousands probably and their families who are still in the IDP camps, but a lot of them who have been rescued, they've already been resettled to third countries, and we're grateful to these countries. We're grateful to France as well. France also have taken hundreds of Yazidi families. But again, you talk about the solution. You talk also about, I think, another point is very important I want to bring is that, will the Muslim world want their minorities to leave? Here I think another angle of discussion we should build, and that the Muslim world, internationally and nationally, I think should be working very hard for the minorities to have a homeland and to be protected, because I think even in the Islamic law, you should take care of the people who are minorities in your homeland. And what happens to the minorities?
That's part of our faith. That is part of our faith. When we are taught our faith, we're taught the rights of the minorities. So it's for us, for a country to be labeled a Muslim country, or to live according to, not that I can't think of a functional country that is actually under Islamic law. What these terrorists try to do is make a mockery of it. But if you study Islamic law, minorities have rights. They have protection from the state. They have the freedom to practice their religion. And so this is very, very true what you are saying. And I know there are efforts, partially by interfaith groups to protect in Muslim majority countries to protect the minorities there, but their efforts also from Muslims or faith leaders around the world to make sure that minorities are protected and that we are working and we hold our own responsible when things like this happen, to not let things like that happen, because that is not a part of a true Islamic society, that the minorities are totally wiped out. This is not the faith that we practice. So this is, yes, I'm glad you brought up that point. And we do really need to push just as we live in minorities in non-Muslim countries, and we fight for their rights, right? Because when Muslims are minorities in many countries, they suffer, and we realize what it feels like, right? Like, I live in the United States as a minority. There's a lot of times where our faith is attacked, so we can relate to minorities in Muslim countries. And I really believe there needs to be much more effort put in by Muslims in Muslim majority countries to protect their minorities.
I couldn't agree more about that. I mean, if you look into what's happening, like in Rohingya and other places in China, where minorities are persecuted, and in some cases, Muslim minorities are persecuted. I think the idea of persecution of minorities, it's a global issue. It's a global issue that's not restricted to any religion or any faith or even any country. What's going on for many years now, hundreds of years, where faith become a weapon, used for political and for other objectives. And this is what we see is faith is being used, and it's being used not just now, and honestly it's not, and that's why it's really important to take it seriously. And it's really important, I think, also for the Muslims of America to first know who these groups are, because we really don't want anyone to buy into this ideology anymore. It's destructive to the family, it's destructive to their own values. We don't want anybody to buy into that. That's one thing. We also want to, the help and awareness, to be, for this not to be seen as just like a Western values thing. We need to create these values within, our own Middle East, our own, like, all these areas. We need to create the new values, a new set of values where people could be, could have different religions, where a woman could be a woman and be proud and, be equal. It's not just minorities. If you, for example, the rights of women, we have miles and probably hundreds of miles more to go.
I have a question about the 2,800 about Yazidis that are still in captivity from the initial capture done by ISIS. How best do you think human rights organizations and everyday citizens can work to raise awareness about these Yazidis, and what can be done to get them out of captivity?
Rescuing just become very difficult, because the children who were taken were very little in 2014. Now they are young boys, and now they don't know who they are. Like, for example, that's for the kids who were taken. For the women who were taken, they are scattered all over places. Some are still in the places, for example, where other radicals group in Afrin and other, Nusra and other groups in Afrin and other places. Now they have different names, but essentially they are same terrorist groups, but with different names in northern Syria, in control of some areas. You have in some cases where women are in houses where basically they need someone to go and help them. In some cases, some of them have had children, and they just subjected, or they just accepted the situation, and they don't seek to come back to the Yazidi community, because now they have, some children that they don't want to come back. So you have a collection of problems. It's a very complex situation. That's why we ask, for example, the Iraqi government to, along with the international community, to create a group, a rescuing mission to go and look for these people. I think another thing that we've always asked for the Muslim leaders, like the religious leaders, to to tell the Ra'iyah, or the people who their followers, that if you know anything, any information about the Yazidis who are missing, please come forward and tell. If you know a child who is somebody else's, who's not their family's child, come forward and tell the authorities. Let's say if it's now SDF or some other authorities in Syria, or like Iraqi authority in Iraq, then we want to extract these children back to their families. It's been just a very messy situation. As you know, most of the families who were taken, the entire family was taken. So in some cases, you have one young boy who was saved, and he just cannot go and look for his family. He himself or she herself is not in a situation to go and take care of it. And there has been no systematic rescue except of an office of rescue have been established by the Kurdistan regional government, and honestly, they've been doing great work along with the Yazidi survivors. And for that reason, we have about 3,500 who have returned already. Without that effort, there will be no return. So.
The way this organization, this terrorist organization, has played with the minds of even young people we've watched it. We watched the Twitter feeds and the slick videos being made and comparing the Euphrates and how even Nutella and kittens were used to pull young girls and young men into and come and fight for us, and there is going to be some and so many people were warned. I was online during those days, even with our organization, writing about it, warning people about it, that this is not Islam, this is not. And just the lure of this organization was so strong. The slickness of how they captured the minds of the young and brought them in. And many of those young women who are now wanting to return back to their parents in Belgium, in England, in all sorts of places, they have nowhere to go. They have destroyed so many lives. It's just really, really horrific. What recommendations do you have for national and international governments in terms of raising, we talked about this, about raising religious minority groups around the world facing discrimination, and forcing those governments to be more open and inclusive? Are you satisfied with the work that is being done in the United Nations? Do you think there needs to be another, like a division dedicated to this? I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think you raised a good question. Let's say you're talking about the justice. You said all these people now who went there to commit crimes, they had really beautiful life here. They had future. And they went, they lost their future, but then they went to a place where they committed crimes, heinous crimes, and they should face meaningful justice. We currently have about 40,000 ISIS militants in prison under SDF in Syria and in Iraq, and there's no pathway to put this on trial for genocide, especially. There's no path to put those on trial for genocide in either Iraq and Syria, and there's no path in Syria to put on trial at all. So you have these thousands of people who were captured, in the scene as they were committing crimes, and there's no legal process to put them on trial. So the Yazidi community, one thing, the demand number one is, the demand is justice, of course. For those people who went back to their countries now and want to reintegrate to life, we want these people to face justice because they caused a lot of harm and they have to pay for it. That's the minimum I think the world can do for the Yazidis. In other aspects of what countries can do and what UN have been doing, some work have been doing with the NGOs and all that. There has been some work that's done, because if that work wasn't done, then people would have starved to death after the genocide. People wouldn't have place to stay, for example, the camps, or they wouldn't have even the basics of life support. But it's not enough. What we need, as I said, we need a global plan, honestly, a global plan to fight this radicalism, to fight it in a way that is sensitive, that we don't create a situation where, fates fighting fates. So that's kind of very counterproductive. Very counterproductive when you accuse a whole faith of something, and we know that's not true. You need to be objective and creative on how you deal with that. So we need to really fight these ideologies that have been destroying the world, and we need governmental plans on that. In terms of on the ground, I mean, I think anyone can help. There's great Yazidi organization. I think individuals can help. Volunteers could help. Go to the area and help rebuilding. A lot of issues are require Iraqi government to act. A lot of the issues require Security Council. For example, if we talk about the Yazidis of Syria, that's a situation of Security Council to intervene to remove Turkey and other radical groups from northern Syria. So that's no longer a national issue. That's a regional issue and a global issue. So a lot could be done. It is just you need goodwill for it, and people really have to act. One thing is really important to understand is that the genocide is not over, and the Yazidi community continue to suffer. They continue to suffer, of course, for no reason, just for being a Yazidi, and that's really the big message, I think.
Also, before the war and before the Iraq-Iran war, and between this time, was there ever a time that Yazidis were able to live peacefully on their land and not be exposed to oppression and try to, rebuild their communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think within the Iraqi state, after the Iraqi state was established in 1920s, Yazidis were okay. When the state was functioning, it was a functioning state, a government, not kind of lawless groups like Qaeda or ISIS. Yazidis were okay. People of Iraq were not treated well, as you know. So the Kurds were not treated. Everybody wasn't treated. The Shias were not treated good. And the country has not been a functioning country in the meaning that you want to see, or how you want to see it. It never has been a meaningful democracy, even in post 2003, where it became basically a democracy, but not a functioning democracy. So I think minorities and Yazidis specifically were okay when the country was a country, when it has borders, has regular forces. But when the country was no longer a country, and that's where you had this insurgent groups take control, and of course they don't abide by any laws. And really, what serve Yazidis and other minorities is either you take them to a country where they will not be attacked for who they are. So that's one option. Everybody leaves. And that's possible, whether we want or we don't want. If this attack against the Yazidis continue, and if the Yazidis continue to be treated, unequal, then eventually Yazidis will leave the Middle East, and there will be the last days or the last years for the Yazidis in the Middle East. And I think that's terrible end for Yazidis, for Christian, not only Yazidis, but the Christian of Iraq. The Kakayans, a small minority of about 50,000 people. In Iraq, they've been crushed. Just this past 2 months ago, one of their villages were killed again, and 7 of their men were killed again. So you're talking about a situation where probably minorities would have to leave their areas. But so we have that option: either people leave, or either we come to building countries that are inclusive, countries that protect and promote religious diversity. I mean, not only protect, but promote religious diversity. I mean, I've said many times, and if God wanted us all to be Muslims, we would have all been Muslims. If God wanted us all to be Christian, we would have been Christians. Or Jews, we would have been Jews. Or Yazidis, we would have all been Yazidis. Because if you believe in God with limitless power, then you cannot put borders what he can do, what he cannot do, or she cannot do. I mean, what he cannot do. You cannot put that. So honestly, the fact of even the base of forcing people to convert in itself is infidelity. I mean, it means you don't believe in God's will. So if you convert someone, or you force someone to convert, that in itself means you don't believe in God, because if you believed in God's power, you wouldn't have done that, and you are really in no way God's wakil, or God's man on earth. why among all population will be you? So
Sure.
definitely that's just
One thing that I wanted to ask you is how does the Yazidi population keep its ties to the faith now? If it's spread all over the world, especially after the genocide, is there a platform that you all gather on? How are marriages taking place? Is there this is something that how do you hold on to the faith now that you're dispersed and people have been evacuated and gone to different countries? Are you worried about them? Other forced, not forced conversions, but missionaries. When these children are taken away by missionaries, are you worried about that? What is the game plan for the community to keep the faith?
yeah. I mean, it has not been. It is a challenge as well, but because Yazidism is an oral tradition, it's not a textbook, and it passes from a generation to generation through teachings, oral teachings that come from people who are specialized in the religion, and they are mostly in Iraq. And also, when Yazidi community was in Syria functioning, so there will be visits by the religious leaderships to these areas. So once you remove people from their homeland, you don't have that structure in place anymore, and it does create really challenging situation. And I think we're thinking about ways what it will take for our faith and our community and our tradition to continue in the Western world. As you know, as you said, the challenge is not only forced conversion, but there are a lot of other challenges, cultural challenges. You need to create a culture that could live globally, a globalized culture that that accept the modern standards. And that's not just for Yazidis. I think for Muslim communities who live in the West, or for others, for all of us, we've came from from countries and cultures that are, tend to be conservative. So we need to find a way, a middle ground, somewhere where we can keep our culture, but also at the same time be proud of the values that we have, in the US, let's say, or Europe or other countries, because you cannot have isolated societies in your homeland. This is your homeland. Um, so also for Yazidis, let's say they are in Germany. So Germany now is their homeland. Just the way that the German children are influenced, the Yazidi children there will be influenced. So that's a challenge. I cannot assure you that all will be fine, but we are trying. We are a small community that deal with much bigger problem there. Its size and its capacity. We're dealing with something that's a mega scale problem for some people who don't have the tools and the resources, and even the people who are in position to help. So yeah, the war, life is a battle and a struggle, and
Yes,
we struggle.
it is. Finally, what is the main message that you'd like to deliver to our audience today about your people? And how best can we work to help support the Yazidis and raise more awareness about the oppression they are facing? We have a minute, so
Yeah, no, we'll keep it short. I think it's very important to know who Yazidis are and to know their culture and to support their culture. Not just to coexist, but to promote, Yazidi rights. I would love to see Muslim activists in the West and in Iraq, and there are activists who support the Yazidi cause internationally, and I would like to see more of that. I would like to look to this. With human eyes, to a problem. I don't do this because I'm a Yazidi. I would have done this exact same work I do if this was a Muslim community, a Christian community, or a Jewish community, or a community of no faith, of no religion. No. I would have done this for any human beings on the planet, because because what's wrong is wrong and what's right is right. And I think people should know what happened to the Yazidi community was wrong. But was wrong, not a simple wrong. It was wrong in a fundamental way. I think any of you or anybody who will watch this can just, like, for a moment, close your eyes and think someone coming and taking your child, someone coming and taking your wife, or even your mother. They've taken our mothers and they did to them what they would do to a girl, what they will do to a child. I think anyone can close his eyes or her eyes and can imagine that. the injustice is injustice, and and what God have given us all, we don't have say in it. We don't have say in it. We don't have a say in it, converting people, forcing people to convert, or attacking people for their faith. Who we are to judge, after all? That's really my final words.
Thank you for those profound words, because really, uh, this is a human issue. This is an issue that many of us, especially when we feel like we're removed from it because we're not there, and we watch. And a lot of us, I'll say this, even while it was taking place, it was hard to take. Many of us are so jaded that we think this is propaganda. This is, they're talking, maybe this is not real. Maybe this is, they're using this another way to target Muslims. But when people know the facts, meet the people, meet the communities, just like Brother Murad over here, who is our brother in humanity, has come and shared everything that you heard from him, and it breaks your heart. And I'm sure many of you have read about this, and really wondered, who are these people, what happened to them? I urge all of you, and thank you so much for being here, Brother Murad. It is our responsibility to educate our communities, and to ask them to help amplify your voice, and to make sure that this chapter in history is not forgotten by anybody, because it is, our faith was used. So thank you all so much for joining us today, and as thank you so much to all of you for joining us today, as we end this show. And please keep an eye out on the action alerts that we sent out on justiceforall.org. And Assalamu alaikum. You're watching us on Muslim Network TV.